Hi, I'm Ryan Daws, Senior Editor at TechForge Media, and joining me today is Igor Jablokov, who is the CEO and founder of Pryon. So, Igor, what are the most pressing ethical concerns in the development and deployment of AI systems?
Yeah, there's not one, maybe there's almost 20 plus of them. I would say uh, people need to worry about whether they're emitting falsehoods or not, right? Which people describe as hallucinations. People need to understand the supply chain, what is called RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback, because that's essentially getting peanut buttered over the third world to look through these things. In some cases, if we're generally talking about, the responsibility of the supplier is to understand that you may be revealing intellectual property and getting it spilled, especially if you're contributing, PII or HIPAA related information, because it could get spilled if it's going off board of your platform. The types of content that you're using to build the model. One, is it owned by somebody else? Meaning they have copyrights and things of that sort. And now you're essentially deflating their contributions and their ownership by essentially presenting things in their style isms as well. And I know that's working its way through the court. In fact, what content do you put in there? Is it biased content? Is there adversarial content in there? Um, then, of course, there's a whole security, concerns associated with embedded agents and prompt injection attacks and supply chain attacks and things of that sort. So there's a lot to cover, and then the ultimate one, which is this uses a lot of energy, right? And we all know that one of the big four issues that we have to tackle is climate change as well.
Of course, as a knowledge surfacing tool, Pryon is dealing with a lot of potentially sensitive information. How do you address data privacy and security concerns in your AI solutions, and what safeguards are in place to prevent data breaches and misuse of user information?
One way is that we give them choices in terms of how they're consuming their platform. So they can go from multi-tenant public cloud to private cloud to on-premises as well. And so when that happens, of course, they have ultimate control. That way, as they start building, collections of knowledge that are closer to their core IP or very sensitive indications that are inside of it, then they can obviously choose a more secure package associated with it. But even the public cloud multi-tenant, they get their own dedicated org. It can only be unlocked with their single sign-on provider and things of that sort as well. Um, but remember, we don't have a consumer side of our business, right? So this thing was born by its very nature because we wanted to catch our own football from some of the previous AI experiences that we've delivered in the past that would consider more in the consumer realm. And we knew that we wanted to create something that was purposely hardened for more critical infrastructure, essential workers, and more serious pursuits.
So, in your review, how is AI influencing decision-making processes across various industries, and what are the potential risks?
The goodness is what happens when something that used to take 2 hours, now takes 2 seconds. So I'll give you a literal example with an energy company. So for years, they've been trying to construct an AI for their outage and maintenance services because they predicted they could reduce the downtime of nuclear power plants by half if they had such a thing, and they poured millions of dollars into it. Not only that, if you can collapse it to half the time, as you're having the refit cycle of these sites, that means you don't have to spin up fossil fuel burning plants, especially in deep summer, deep winter, and it makes the energy grid more resilient. Now, on the other side of it, this is where things get a little bit hairy. If any of you have watched documentaries about 3 Mile Island, you'll realize that we were within 30 minutes of a Chernobyl-like event that would have irradiated the eastern seaboard. Only 30 minutes. And when Congress finally did an investigation, they found six reasons why that was. One was a design flaw. The second was a faulty valve. Four out of six conditions, Ryan, were knowledge management issues. Engineers and technicians weren't getting the information that they needed as rapidly as they needed to safeguard the rest of us. And so that's a literal example of something where time actually matters versus like, hey, it would be really nice for me to quickly, get accurate content to a client. Hey, it would be really nice for me to know how many days of vacation I still have left. Here's an example where decision support, decision advantage is of utmost criticality.
That might kind of answer my next question. But do you support the idea of explainable AI and making how decisions are made by AIs understandable to both technical and non-technical users?
Absolutely. You hit on an important theme there. That's why we always start with an extraction step that literally reveals solutions from an enterprise's own underlying content. So think about, they may have applications like ServiceNow, SAP, Salesforce. They may have cloud document folders like Documentum, SharePoint, Google Drives, and things of that sort. So you have potentially tens of millions, if not billions, of objects, audio, video, images, text, PowerPoints, PDFs, Word files, web pages that are, sitting there by the bushel loads. It's our job to automatically transform them into a consumable format. But when our platform reveals an answer, you can tap it and it always goes to the underlying page and highlights exactly where it learned a piece of information from. So there's always verifiable attribution to a source. And then you can also tell who authored that piece of information and whether you trust the underlying um, knowledge or now you know where to verify that information.
So what oversight mechanisms do you have in place to ensure responsible use of AI? Do you have any human oversight? And in what situations does that human intervention occur?
So we do for another energy company. They were worried that the engineers were going to be moving too fast to decisions. And I think for either some regulatory reasons or some insurance reasons, they didn't want non-deterministic output from an AI, being taken to the field. And so we added a verification construct where supervisors can double check the outcomes and essentially give it a badge of approval, if you will. And then the technicians that were working in that case, it was wind turbines, only operated with the ones that had those indications as well. And so in that case, it's not prime scientists and engineers that are figuring out, what the actual values should be. It's the subject matter experts that were supervising those personnel to ensure that there wasn't going to be a problem in life and limb, in the operations of obviously very cumbersome and expensive machinery that were the final arbiters whether or not somebody could essentially accept that information.
I think a lot of people would agree with that. So what are your thoughts on the general current regulatory environment around AI?
I think it's early days of it as well. I'm happy that there's even a discussion of it, especially given there's other elements in the consumer tech space where we didn't get ahead of it, fast enough. In some cases, that's because it was nascent technology and we weren't sure how it was going to be affecting our communities. I think in this particular case, many folks were pleasantly surprised with the White House's executive order that at least it's asking the right questions. And I think what tends to happen after that at the state level, the Californians tend to be some of the first adopters of regulatory regimes and things of that sort, and they're starting to ask questions about what should be put in those containers. And of course, Europe, typically leads the whole gamut of regulation with the AI Act. But it's going to take several turns until this gets right, so that end users, whether they're consumers or in the enterprise, are safeguarded. But there's enough freedom to operate still, to move innovation forward. And look, it's there's going to be some gray areas in between that are going to need to be figured out in the months, quarters, and years ahead.
Does Pryon collaborate with external stakeholders such as academics, lawmakers, or ethicists on responsible AI development?
Absolutely. So we're back channeling to a mess of government agencies. We do have a head of government affairs that actually was in a previous administration. He was the privacy czar that negotiated some of the indications with GDPR when it was being born as well. And so the point is, we're taking an active hand in terms of contributing our perspectives on the regulatory environment as it rolls out. I think we're doing a lot of AI literacy briefings, as I mentioned before, and so we're showing up by expressing some of the risks associated with generative AI usage, whether it's frequent hallucinations, static training data, the fact that it's hard to update these models, that there is a high risk of data leakage. There's potential for vendor lock-in, as these different platforms host your information. There's a way of reverse engineering the training data, that there's a lack of per user access controls. I already mentioned prompt injection attacks, supply chain attacks, adversarial attacks, copyright issues, legal constraints with the T's and C's associated with models, even some of the ones that are describing themselves as open source technically aren't. You have toxic and biased responses that we mentioned before, and that's emanating from the underlying training data. These are monolithic LLMs at times, so they have massive energy consumption. I think at times when you drop in a prompt in some of those consumer AI tools, a single prompt could be the equivalent of 30 minutes of a light bulb being left on. So be careful the number of times that you ask it to construct poetry and things of that sort. And then on the other side of this, you have bigger issues like model collapse, where they're eating their own output and they start going crazy. Drifting models, meaning you have non-deterministic output over time as the models adapt themselves, which is not a thing that you typically want in a hospital environment, in a power plant environment, in a government environment. You've seen a bot recently at, I think, being used for civic services in New York City, essentially give guidance to small businesses that would have run contrary to the laws of the city and things of that sort. And then, of course, there's all sorts of ways of poisoning the training data, inserting sleeper cell backdoors. And then you have to wonder how these companies that deliver these services are governed in the first place. Whether they have the right architecture for ensuring that they have embedded AI ethicists and they're making the right calls, red teaming themselves and things of that sort. So there's a whole lot to unpack here. Of course, this is why we deliver those briefings.
Now let's get into the fun topic of existential threats. So Anthropic's CEO, I'm sure you saw this, recently said that they have an AI safety rating system from 1 to 4, where 3 is AI being used for disinformation and making biological weapons, and 4 being AI that is beyond human control. He thinks that we're now currently at 3 and will hit 4 between 2025 to 2028, but he still thinks the advantages outweigh the risks. What are your thoughts?
Look, there's an elegant way of translating that. You can say every rose has its thorns, right? That would be an elegant way of saying it. Um, the problem is there's typically 7 negative uses for every positive use, right? And in the same way that there's always an amplification of 7 negative voices for every one positive voice, which is strange given that there's a lot more kids building sandcastles than kicking them down in a beach scene that you'll all witness this coming summer. That's a hard one. I mean, all the only thing that we can do is worry about ourselves and ensure that our platforms work for the environments that they're meant to. And we're not a clown college. I mean, our stuff is designed to go into some of the more serious environments on planet Earth. The things that safeguard our communities, that make our water, that make our energy, that make our food and things of that sort. So in some ways, I'm not part of this carnival and this circus that's out there. We've always worked towards verifiable attribution. So extracting out of an enterprise's or government agency's own content so that they understand where the solutions are coming from, and then they decide, whether they make a decision with it or not. Using it for more creative pursuits, in the way that they're doing, where they're losing sight of land in some ways, is not appropriate for for some of these more serious use cases. I think none of you would feel comfortable ending up in an emergency room and having the medical practitioners there typing in queries into a chat GPT, a Bing, a Bard, whatever they want to call themselves now, Copilot, and Gemini, and getting solutions. You want somebody that has hopefully many years experience treating things similar to the ailment that you're currently undergoing. And guess what? You like the fact that there is an emotional quality, that they care about getting you better as well, and that's at times missing. When people think that these AIs can do things like educate folks and safeguard folks. I think it's worthy to keep exploring the boundaries of these style of technologies, but we do have to be careful where we put them.
Pryon is, of course, a key sponsor of this year's AI and Big Data Expo North America. Can you tell us a little bit about its presence at the event and what you'll be sharing with attendees?
Yeah, I think during this quarter, we're going to be revealing a number of accounts that will be very surprising, both in terms of their stature and the use cases. That tend to be very robust. Given the industries that those entities are in, and some examples I already mentioned today are energy, semiconductor, pharma, government agencies and the like. That's currently our sweet spot. Is robust industries, and I think we're going to be revealing a lot more of that. And there's different ways to consume the Pryon platform. So for those of you that don't, have an understanding of my background, I used to lead an advanced AI team at IBM, and we discovered the baby version of Watson over 2 decades ago, and they didn't greenlight it. And so, in my frustration, I departed, stood up our last company. In 5 years into it, it was Amazon's first AI related acquisition that birthed what many people know as Alexa. So Alexa's my older sister's name, which is a coincidence, but the code name for it was Prime, and we decided to reuse it because I knew that we wanted to catch our own football. That this style of natural language experience was going to be coming to more serious pursuits. Now, this platform was always designed as an end-to-end system, but there's 3 different ways to consume it. One way is, of course, vertically oriented, where we can connect to an enterprise's content, transform that content in an interactive model, and then give you a user experience in order to perform those extracts. Or you can bolt on your own user experience, let's say to power your own assistants inside of mobile apps, chatbots on your web pages, digital humans, which we announced previously with Dell and team, or to power RPAs or for any service that you want. But we are also going to be working towards giving developers lower level access to the platform so that they can power their own workflows as well. We'll be revealing all of that as we go deeper into the quarter.
I look forward to hearing all about it. Well, that's everything from me today, Igor. So thank you for coming along and having an insightful conversation. And hope you guys have a great event.
Thanks for having me.